it's looking beyond what is just the NERC standards and saying, how do we improve operational excellence? How do we take what is a already really reliable and functional generation community and make it even better? And learning from each other and showing external organizations, whether they be FERC, DHS, whomever, that the industry is capable of leading itself. And last slide, I just want to give a shout out to our upcoming annual meeting, which is being held November 1st and 2nd at the NERC offices in Atlanta. We've got FERC Commissioner Norris giving a keynote. We have representation from Jerry Cawley, Paul Barber, Mike Moon, probably NERC Board of Trustees members will be there. We get regional representation from audit staff, compliance directors, enforcement directors. So last year was the first annual and was very successful. Had over 200 people show up. It was standing room only, and a lot of great things were accomplished, and we're looking to continue that again this year.
Josh, can anyone attend that meeting? Is that a membership only? How does that work?
It's a membership only meeting, but membership at this point, since the due structure has not been finalized, is free. So it's a matter of going out to the Generator Forum website and clicking to register with the Generator Forum if you're not already. All you have to do is provide your NERC registration criteria that you are registered as a GEO and or GOP, and once that's validated, you are considered a member for the time being.
So you don't have an associate member or, hey, I'm just interested in this type of thing. Right now it's limited to GOGOPs.
Right now it's limited to GOGOPs. However, we do allow vendors and other organizations to be sponsored by an existing member. So even vendors are allowed to be members of the Generator Forum so long as they have a sponsored organization.
Okay, perfect. Other questions for Josh, really, before we move on? Okay, well, there'll be more opportunity, but.
I have a question.
Sure.
So registered entities are, for example, QFs allowed? Qualifying facilities?
I don't know.
Okay. Because they're kind of under the registration criteria radar in a lot of cases, but they may need something like this in representation, because, as you know, this policy is eventually going to creep out into their space too. They're not impervious to the policy finding at some point.
Right now, I don't think anything is without question. So I would encourage those entities to attempt to register.
Okay.
Get it in front of the steering committee, and if we don't have the basis to have a QF join today, that's not to say that we can't create that avenue for them to join in the future. We're definitely not in a practice right now of excluding anyone, really, except for just transmission-only companies. But they kind of have their own forum, and this forum's target goal is the generators. But I do want to touch on that real quick, because what I am trying to create, and what the Generator Forum is trying to create in the security practices group, we're trying to work alongside the transmission forum, because there's commonalities, there's best practices that can be shared. There's no reason not to communicate with each other. So Karl, Perman, and I from the transmission forum have already started talking about how we can get those two organizations on a somewhat regular basis talking to each other.
Great, thanks. We'll pass the mic over to Matt Jastram. Matt's on the steering committee of the Western Interconnection Compliance Forum. And he's got a couple slides too, so we'll give him a second to pull those up.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Matt Jastram, WCIF chair at this point, and just kind of want to walk through, my presentation is very similar to Josh's. In fact, the Generator Forum kind of took some of the elements of the WCIF forum and kind of built that as a foundation. So a lot of what you'll hear is kind of similar with Josh, but there are some definite differences, and I'll walk through those with you. One thing I want to just kind of walk through is just a quick little agenda. You know, our membership is very Western oriented, so to speak. We are mostly most of our membership is, or actually all of our membership is based out of WEC, so the WEC region. All of the members are, all 550 members are from registered entities in the West, basically. And that is everything from GOP to all the registered functions. So 14 registered functions are a part of WCIF. I just briefly wanted to talk about our CIP direction and how we're addressing the CIP standards from a compliance standpoint, and then also mention our focus groups, and then how WCIF kind of works towards improving compliance. So this is kind of just a quick little heat map that shows our membership. You can see that a lot of it's based out of the West. The East Coast there is basically registered entities that are in the East. So they're registered entities in the East that have actually assets in the West. So that's why they're kind of, even though they're in the East Coast, they're still in the WEC region, so to speak. And then you'll notice that there is some Canadian entities as well that are registered with WCIF. WCIF right now is actually, and always will be, free to all members. We have really prided ourselves that it is a voluntary organization, and we really don't want to ever go to towards the union dues or paying dues. All 550 of our members, and actually we recently this summer just went through our whole membership list and contacted each individual member and said, hey, do you still want to be a part of WCIF? And so 550 responded back, we do. We think it's valuable. It's something that we would continually like to be getting email updates and being a part of the conversation. The other big piece about our membership is that we meet 3 times a year, and we're in conjunction with the WEC Compliance User Group meetings, and that's a great opportunity. We have a really good rapport with WEC as far as we get to meet during their time. We take their facilities, and we're able to do that, and it's a great rapport and relationship with them, and it's something we hope to continue because really it's all of our members that are there, sometimes it's been over 350, are able to dialogue and network and interact with each other, and it's really been very beneficial. I think it's really helped a lot of registered entities to really take a step back from their compliance duties back home and meet together wherever the WEC meetings are at, and sit down and converse and trade business cards and really have a great conversation. And the other thing that's really helpful, I think, to registered entities is that a lot of compliance staff is really turning over. In fact, a third of the compliance participants at these compliance user group meetings are new, and they're brand new to the industry. And so for us, WCIF is there for them. It's something that they're able to join, they're able to be a part of, and once you join, you're instantly a part of the conversation. Your email box fills up with all kinds of best practices and conversations and questions. And we're also on the Yahoo site as well, and we've kind of reached our limit. We're looking at options on what we can do moving forward. But the big piece is just getting the conversation going. And especially in the cyber world, because of all the changes that we've seen happening so recently, you're not always comfortable posting something on a Yahoo account, but you could post something there with your contact information, and the next thing you know, you're getting emails and phone calls, and you're dialoguing about specific issues, and it really makes an impact on your compliance efforts, and that's where we kind of pride ourselves on. Just kind of some 2012 direction that we've kind of worked towards. We launched focus groups, similar to kind of what the Generator Forum is doing. These focus groups are 10 to 12 registered entities working towards a common good. I mean, we've got internal compliance programs and GOTO issue, enforcement, compliance tools. We basically have 10 groups that we started. And one of those groups is a CIP group. It's a group of about 20 people right now, and it keeps growing. We keep getting more and more members, and I'll touch briefly on what they do on the next slide as far as their direction so far. But it's been a really great group because there's a lot of dialogue that happens and a lot of networking that takes place about CIP issues. Last month we had a WCIF CIP peer sharing event in August. It was hosted by the California ISO in their new facility. We had about 28 different registered entities there, and it was a great time to be able to share industry best practices. We basically had panels, and the only way you could be a part of it or participate was that you had to provide some type of panel presentation. And so that kind of created a ton of dialogue back and forth, and we had panels for SIP 2, SIP 5, SIP 7, as well as tools, compliance tools, and all it really took was for a few people to step up and just start sharing and being really open to the shortcomings as well as the best practices that they had. And we had some tremendous conversations. I think it really helped to get people in a room who have faced and been challenged with the same exact issues in the WEC region and really take some lessons learned home with them. And we had a lot of great materials from that meeting, but we kept it only to the participants. Those were the only people that were able to receive those materials. And then I also kind of briefly touched on the WICF Forum CIP conversations. Up here, I'm sorry the slide is a little overwhelming, but these are just kind of some of the major things that we've been doing in this focus group. Lately, or just recently, we had our membership. We had a survey basically asking our members, version 5, what's going to make it pass, what's going to not make it pass. And we worked with the trade group EEI to kind of articulate, hey, this is what our members are saying about version 5. And they took that back and kind of shared that with the drafting team. And, the recent draft 3 kind of, I think, was impacted by that. Also working through the most recent draft of SIP 5. And then that big discussion between version 4 and 5, what's going to happen? That's kind of been a topic of their conversations. I think they're meeting like on a monthly basis where they're having a call. I think they had one today, this afternoon. And then recently we've been really trying to work with WEC. We actually had a conference call last week with Brent with the whole TFE streamlining process and just how we can support that effort. How many of you have dealt with TFEs? Anybody dealt with the TFE? Okay. Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming, and this process, I can tell you, is much simpler. Imagine one spreadsheet, and that's it. That's what you're providing on a self-certification basis. That would be a lot easier than Part A, Part B, denial, all the other things. I won't go into the details because I'll bore you. So that's kind of WICF in a nutshell. These are the major, I think, linchpins to the future of WICF. Really the people. Back in 2007, there was a group of people who were dealing with compliance, and they were having trouble with, and you probably heard this word before, but inconsistency with working with WEC. And the overall goal was to say, hey, what if we had a group of people who came together and took the issues or concerns that the membership, our members, from registered entities, the utilities, and kind of took their comments and filtered out the names of the entities and took their comments right to WEC and said, hey, what are you guys doing about this? Or how can we improve this? How can we make the relationship better? And ever since then, since 2007, the conversation has continued with WEC. As a chair, I'm attending board meetings. I'm constantly in contact with WEC staff, and there's a good rapport there because we believe that if we keep bringing concerns directly to WEC and they address them, our membership is in a better place, and we'll continue to do that. The opportunity, again, a lot of that opportunity comes from, if there's issues with compliance, if there's issues in audits, if there's issues, bring them to WICF, bring them to our steering committee of 14, similar to the Generator Forum, and we sit, we converse, we talk about them, we provide comments right to WEC. And it's kind of like the opportunity to say, instead of calling WEC directly and taking a few shots, send it to WICF, and they'll tone it down a little bit and be diplomatic and send it off to WEC, and we'll get those issues addressed. And that's kind of what the opportunity is. The context, from a cybersecurity side, the context is changing. Look at draft 3. It's just ever evolving. And I mean, from my perspective, and this is my personal opinion, I don't think that NERC and FERC I think NERC obviously is going to pass it, but I don't know if FERC is. It just seems like they raised the bar too high and said, yeah, let's do this and that, and I just don't. All right, well, we'll see how that turns out.
A little wager?
Yeah, a little wager.
Is there a little wager?
Yeah. And the last part is just the risk and reward. It is, I'm not going to say it's not a risk to go out and say and share your compliance program, your best practices, what you're doing, especially in the cyber world. But I will say the reward is there. I mean, if somebody would have told me that the level of vulnerability that you saw last month at the CIP sharing event that we had would have taken place, I would have said, I would hope for that, but I'm not sure if it would. But because people came forward and they just said, hey, here's where we struggled, here's where we made mistakes, here's where we could have improved, and other people in the rooms, their eyes lit up, they couldn't write notes fast enough. And that's why there's such a reward in sharing and peer sharing and that all taking place. And as WICF, we will continue to do that. So,
Matt, how do people become a member of WICF? What's the criteria as far as that, and what do they need to do to participate in WICF?
it's very similar to Generator Forum. You just basically have to be a NERC registered entity and go to our website, and you basically fill out a quick form that lists out your name, entity, and then your registered functions, whatever your functions are. We do provide an opportunity to have sponsorship similar to the Generator Forum, where if you're a consultant and you are currently in contract with a registered entity, then we are able to say, we'll contact that registered entity and say, hey, this person's saying you're sponsored by you, is that a true statement? And we basically get verification and go from there. Also nonprofits, EnergySec is also a part of WICF. So,
Perfect. All right. Patrick Miller's going to cover just quickly for us. There's a number of other compliance forums out there. We weren't able to get representation from everyone today to come up here and talk, so Patrick's going to just quickly cover a couple others for us. We'll open it up for some questions and some comments after that.
Yeah, I think what Matt has echoed is we've seen the value of WICF in the WEC region, at least. When people get together and they actually start sharing and open up and not just talk about the successes, but talk about the failures, and literally open the kimono. But they don't do that unless they trust who they're sharing with. I mean, sharing doesn't happen without trust, and trust doesn't happen without relationships. So the fact that they get together face to face, they know each other, they're all living the same life, the same job, the same stuff going on in their lives. There's this tremendous amount of camaraderie and basically trust that fosters the sharing that happens there. The fact that they can do that behind closed doors is the biggest thing of all, and the fact they can do that behind closed doors and then have the outcome, the distilled outcome from those discussions be sanitized and anonymized of any specific organization and funneled off to WEC for whatever it might be for conversation, discussion points, actual requests to WEC for a response in some cases. That absolves any of the organizations from any essential lashback or risk, because it's now this community, this safety in numbers, this herd of wildebeest instead. So this is not, this isn't something that's just unique to the Western region. There's been other areas, for example, Florida is talking about spinning one up. Texas has tried several times, and they keep trying to get different dynamics going on. But there's definitely the Mid-Continent Compliance Forum, the MCCF. There's a region around the Georgia area that's primarily driven by Georgia, but the neighboring states, or at least neighboring counties around Georgia, are involved as well. So this concept isn't just something that's unique to the West or unique to a specific type of generation or transmission. It's part of what this whole sharing and this community-based grassroots bottom-up perspective is. And I think that whatever it might be, whether it's WICF or transmission or something brand new that starts tomorrow, these things are of tremendous value. And it's not just something that you go and you have beers and you rant and you complain. I've actually seen real directional shift from the regions, from NERC, and from FERC, from these kinds of organizations. So this isn't just a complaining session. It actually translates into real, tangible value, and as I mentioned, directional shift in your oversight organizations. So it's beneficial in a lot of ways. Sure, it's cathartic to get around the table and say, wow, we suffer from the same thing. But to have that translate into something that actually changes the direction of regulation or policy in your space is a completely different picture. That is tremendous value. So I think that's kind of why we wanted to showcase the fact that this is happening, what types of different slices of demographics you can see, and if there's any interest in starting or forming or joining or being part of any of these things, by all means, get on the bandwagon. It's hugely valuable.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any specific questions for these guys? All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up and get us back on schedule. I apologize for starting a little bit late. Just to kind of tag on with what what Patrick said, being part of a community, whether you're part of compliance, you're part of security, you're part of anything, has a tremendous amount of value. I was part of both EnergySec and the Western Interconnection Compliance Forum when I worked at a utility. I literally saved the utility that I worked for hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions of dollars really, by having those resources, by having people that were willing to talk to me, share with me, talk about failures. Honestly, talking about failures are way more important than talking about successes when it comes to fines, right? Somebody is willing to get up there and, as Patrick says, open the kimono and say, this is how we failed miserably. It's going to cost us a lot of money, but hopefully that doesn't happen to you guys. So these communities are a huge valuable piece, and I know culturally in the West, I think they're easier for us than in the East. In the East, it doesn't seem to be quite as comfortable sharing, and I hope that maybe over the years some of that will change, because I think sharing that information with each other, so how we do our jobs day to day, the things that we've learned, you can't say enough about how valuable that is. So thank you very much. Thank you, panelists. We're going to take a few minutes to get set up for the next panel here, and let's give them a round of applause.